So the NFL draft. NFL draft in the books. One thing that I am prepared to do around here, as you see on election night sometimes, is I'm prepared to call something. Sometimes there's a lot of hyperbole pumped into this stuff. You got your winners, you got your losers, you got your early mock drafts for 2022. Well, we're doing none of that. But I was talking to Jesse earlier today, and I was talking to Director Emeritus Colin right before we went on air, and there's one thing that I feel is no longer a matter of opinion. I feel it's a matter of fact. And what I want to do is I don't want you to just take my word for it. Sometimes I ask you to do that. Tonight, not necessary. And what it all boils down to is this whole argument about conference superiority, conference supremacy, and which one is here and which one is there. So I had our crew put together over the last, 10 to 15 drafts. Jesse, I can't even remember what the timeline was, which conference had the most players drafted. And so what I found was there was some commonality and there were some themes, and dare I say there was even a trend. So Jesse, if we have that, let's go ahead and show that. The conferences, not just the teams, not just individuals, but conferences overall with the most players drafted. And here's what I want you to do. If you're watching on YouTube, you can follow along with me. We start in 2007, okay? And what happened was the SEC had the most players drafted. And then 2008 happened, and 2009, and I think, let's go ahead and put 2010 in there. So in 2010, they also had the most players drafted. So from 2007 to 2010, SEC leads the way. But then it really picks up steam. And so 2011 through 15, it's the SEC every single year. And so I start to think there possibly could be something to this. But maybe you're still not convinced. And so for good measure, they just ran off another string of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. So right now, I am prepared to call this as the SEC being the dominant conference in college football. What we have right now is 2007 to 2020, 21. I mean, everywhere in between, it's the SEC leading the way. So I thank you for putting that together, Jesse. Here's the hard truth number one on the show tonight. Either the NFL is in on this whole SEC bias thing that a lot of you fill my inbox with on a weekly basis, or it's true. It's kind of like that movie Signs. Either it's the most elaborate hoax ever devised, or it's for real. I think it's for my opinion. It's for real. Could still be a hoax, but I think it's for real. Here's what I'm talking about. So a lot of you don't buy into this, and I just want you to sit there for 45 seconds and just laugh along with me. But I get a lot of folks who fill the inbox and fill up the iJosh on a weekly basis, especially in the season when we maybe talk about some SEC programs disproportionate to the rest of the country on the show. Or if you run a major website out there, or you run a major network, and you talk about maybe the SEC a little bit disproportionate, it's bias. If you're a playoff committee member and you may rank 3 or 4 SEC teams in the top 10, it's just bias. Well, it's bias towards good. They're just better right now. Could change, but as we've seen, it's not a 2 or 3 year deal. It's not a flash in the pan. They're better and they care more. So I always ask this, and it's a very calm response. I normally don't even capitalize the first letter of the sentence when I respond. That's how calm I am. When I respond to you guys who say that, I just say, how would you do it any different? Now, all I can control is our show, but I ask about our show. What would you do differently? If you were to talk, let's say LSU or Georgia or Florida, and then you were to talk, no disrespect, I'm picking teams out of thin air, TCU, Arizona State, and Washington, and you saw the traffic patterns, and it leaned 6-to-1 ratio, one side versus the other, what would you do? Because I'm beholden to you, not the other way around, so I'm just taking the show wherever it is you want me to take it. But it's really easy to look and see that chart and what it indicates, right? But here's the pushback I get. Now, this is where it gets fun. Okay, so now we don't just take the what, we want to dive into the why. What is the NFL draft telling us? If I heard this once this weekend, I heard it 1,000 times. Well, it's really easy to dominate and get all the talent when it's in your backyard. I'm going to grant you it's easier, but I don't know if it's just easy. Like that's the end-all, be-all, and that is the only pillar that you need standing in that quest of yours to be a dominant football program. Because then I have Jesse and the fine folks up in Connecticut right now. I had them put together another graphic, and I said, guys, can we please go find the states that is producing, states, plural, so that are producing the most high school talent. And you want to know what we found? A really mixed bag. So let's take a look at the states producing the most high school talent, and then you tell me if you see a theme right here, because you know who dominates recruiting. But then we look at Florida. This is counting the kids at IMG Academy, by the way, so they're from all over the country. Florida leading the way. Texas, they're at number 2. Georgia, number 3. California, number 4. So I asked this question. What about that chart indicates that having talent in your backyard alone is what makes it so easy to dominate? Because I look at what Alabama's doing right now, and I look at what Ohio State's doing. I look at, in a lot of cases, what Clemson's doing. Not only do they largely own their in-state recruiting, but if you look at that state at the top, Florida, if you look at that state in the number 2 spot, Texas, and you look at that state in the number 4 spot, which is California, wouldn't you know it? Alabama and Ohio State, and in some cases Clemson, they're doing more in those states than the University of Texas and USC are, and a lot of the schools in the state of Florida. Florida, Miami, Florida State, we've been well documenting this on this program. It'd be one thing if Bama locked down Alabama. It'd be one thing if Ohio State locked down Ohio. They're out recruiting Texas and Texas. They out recruit a lot of the Florida schools in Florida. Look at the quarterbacks, just the quarterback position alone. That is the ignition. That's the very focal point on which a lot of these programs are built. DJ Uiagalelei is going to start Clemson this year. What state do you think he's from? Bryce Young's going to start at Bama this year. JT Daniels is going to start at Georgia. Where do you think they came from? They didn't come from Peach County and Roanoke, Alabama, and Connally, South Carolina, respectively. That's not where they came from. They came from way over there in that state. I think we had listed number, 4 right there, California, 19. So here's what I'm asking again, and here's what I continue to take away from the NFL draft. Everyone, it seems, at least that talks to me, wants some more balance in college football, and a lot of people are searching for that elusive P word, that parity. Watch out. Parity. That's the P word that they've been searching for. And so, you've got some people who say, if we expand the playoff, that'll give it to us. I disagree, but reasonable minds can do that. Some other people say, if we lower the total scholarship limit, that'll do it. I totally disagree, but again, reasonable minds, like in an argument, someone has to be wrong. I'm happy to let you be that person in that argument. But here's what I would like to ask you. Let's say we didn't change anything else about the sport, and let's just say that USC got their act together. Or let's say Texas got their act together. A&M's doing a pretty decent job of it. Oklahoma's doing a good job recruiting Texas for Texas. But let's say the Longhorns got their act together. Let's say the Gators, Seminoles, and Hurricanes got their act together. Let's say we changed nothing else about college football, but just the big boys in the state of Florida and Texas and California got their act together. What would that do? Well, number one, it would inject way more balance, naturally, might I add, and parity, naturally, might I add, than you trying to reverse engineer it through changing a postseason format. That's not going to do anything. We talked about that a million times. Some of you are going to have to learn that the hard way, unfortunately. But as long as you have Saban and Ryan Day and Dabo coming into your state, in some cases having to fly 4 or 5 hours to do so, and outworking you in your own backyard, what's a postseason format change? What's that going to do? It's not going to do anything. So if you want, again, as we talked about before, more balance in the sport, shift your attention towards hiring better, and then shift your attention towards looking at these schools like, for instance, USC, like, for instance, Texas, like, for instance, Florida, Miami, Florida State. I'm not saying they're hanging out in the 60s in the recruiting rankings, but what I'm telling you is when we just showed you that chart where all the talent's coming from, there's no excuse for them not to be dominating. And there's especially, doubly and triply no excuse for a program in Columbus, Ohio, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to be coming into Texas or coming into California and taking the talent that's right in your backyard. Do you think those kids grew up wanting to move 2,000 miles away from home? Or is it much more likely that the only viable scenario that they see to maximum development just happens to be 1,000 or 2,000 miles away from home? You fix that, and you fix a lot of your parity problems in college football. Now, before we move on here, on 247sports.com right now, if you're watching the live show, if you're listening to the recorded show, you can probably go find this. Steve Wiltfong, as we know him around here, Uncle Wiltfong, did a really good article, and it's a feature about his takeaways, winners and losers, as you probably would refer to it, of not National Signing Day, of the NFL Draft. And he was talking about several programs. I'll let you go read the article, but one thing that stood out to me was Michigan. Talked about a lot of these other programs. Michigan stood out to me. Michigan continues to pump out NFL draft picks. I got the numbers here. They had 10, okay, that's right. So 10 drafted last year, 8 more drafted this year. So 18 guys have been drafted out of Michigan, not signed, drafted out of Michigan the last 2 years. And the results just don't feel like they match up. Some of these programs, it falls right in line. You look at the top, which programs pumped out the most kids? Bama, Ohio State. Who met in the national championship? Bama, Ohio State. But then there are some outliers. As I said, the NFL draft can be a very good truth teller, or a very tough truth teller. Because with Michigan, I look at the results, and you've got what you need. You got talent coming in adequately. You've got talent being developed adequately. But if you're a Michigan fan, none of that really matters to you. It's great. It's a nice source of pride. But when you look at the on-field product and you say, we're not only not performing equal to or relatively equal to that you would expect a team that just pumped out 18 draft picks over a 2-year span, we are actually operating at a standard below some of the programs that are pumping out fractions of the amount of NFL talent that we are. Now, I think the answer to fixing that is layered. Maybe they've already answered it, but I was just looking that over, and I mean, that's 18 kids the last 2 years. Now, the good news for Michigan is if that's the case, which it is, we just did the math for you, if that's the case, that doesn't mean a big overhaul is needed. That doesn't mean fundamental changes or foundational changes are needed. A lot of times, if you got a program that already has the talent level there and the development there, you just took care of a whole lot. Because there are a lot of good coaches out there. There are a lot of really good run programs out there that don't have the talent, and therefore they can't develop it and all that. So if you got the A and the only B that's needed is, well, we got to maybe fix something procedurally around here, that's a tweak. A lot of times that's a tweak. It's not a fundamental change. So I guess that's a ray of hope for Michigan fans.